friend. I'm Mike, and today I'm here to introduce you to the Wheel of Time. Yes! See, I'm not just here to review books or analyze them. I want to introduce you to them because I want to help you find your next favorite book. So I'm not just here to recommend my favorites. It's about helping you find something that you're going to enjoy reading. So I don't use spoilers. I avoid using big sentences and long words, alright? It's about just helping you find something to read that you'll enjoy. Now, let's look at the Wheel of Time. You might have heard about this because of the TV series that's doing pretty well at the moment, or maybe you've just been hearing about the series for the longest time and you've got some super fan who's obsessed with it, who's always trying to tell you to read it. Or maybe you just clicked on this video because you thought it was a Hemsworth. No. Well, now's the time to give it a go. The world of the Wheel of Time has magic known as the One Power. And long ago, men tried to use the male half of the One Power to destroy evil forever, and it backfired terribly. Oh yeah. Now, any man who touches the power will almost immediately go insane and go on a killing spree, and when this happened, it literally caused an apocalypse and broke the world. So it's really bad. Now only women can use the One Power, and they use it to protect the world. They act as guardians. But there are a whole bunch of prophecies that the man who led that rebellion against evil is going to be reincarnated one day, and he's going to come back and face the Dark One again, and he'll be the savior of humanity or the destroyer. Bam! So good. So Robert Jordan, the author, was really fascinated with the idea of the savior of mankind, because in all these other fantasy books, people are always like, hey, you're the savior, and the guy's like, great, off we go on the journey. Robert always thought, that's a bit unrealistic. People can be a bit more selfish than that, or a little bit more reluctant to be heroes, so he wanted to explore the idea of the savior concept. And so it's really good at breaking those established stereotypes and doing a new story. The first elephant in the room... The Wheel of Time is bloody long. So the series has 14 books and a prequel, and there's a side information novel and a compendium. There's just so much stuff, right? The average number of pages per book is like 900. Okay, so honestly, that alone might mean that this series is not right for you. You see, people always recommend the books they like, and they're always like, oh, you've got to read this book, it's the best thing ever. It's about finding a book that's right for you and your reading ability. So if you're not used to reading big books, you're going to struggle with this series. I've got to tell you that up front, and it might not mean it's the right series for you. The fact is, Wheel of Time is a chunky boy, alright? It's best suited to people who have already got really good, healthy reading habits in place and are already tackling some pretty big books. If you don't have a good reading habit in place, hey, welcome to my channel, alright? I'm going to find you something to read. Let's just start with something that's more manageable so you can build up your reading muscles and get onto the big stuff. Remember, a lot of people will go to the gym for the first time and they'll try to go straight to the hardest routine, and then it gets too difficult and they get overwhelmed and then they just give up, okay? Reading big series is a lot like that. Start with something smaller, get used to the bigger stuff. And if you're already reading big stuff, bam, you're not going to have a problem with this, alright? You're good. You're fine. Let's go. I would argue that the Wheel of Time has some of the best character work in fantasy. Not only that, in literature itself, okay? It's fantastic. Robert Jordan was a master of writing character perspectives. And what I mean by that is, in a regular book, you might walk into a city and you'll get like a list of descriptions and visual images, but Robert Jordan would actually consider the point of view of the person looking at that city and write in a way that would match that. So for example, a wealthy person might be shocked by the number of homeless people, right? A dashing rogue might focus on the taverns and all the pubs, and a country farmer might just be awed by the sheer number of people. Right? So it's those different perspectives that really put you on the ground, viewing it in such a real sense. There is a downside to that. So the series has such a large number of characters. That can mean it can take a while before you get back to your favorite character's perspective. It can be a few hundred pages in that time in between, and sometimes you can just learn to resent the character that you're stuck reading from when you just want to get back to your favorites. So there's a bit of that. Another downside is sometimes the best characters have the worst plot line. Perry. Gwen. Anyway, but back to the good stuff. Wheel of Time has incredible character arcs. This is a slight spoiler, and I do avoid these, but Wheel of Time actually has a relatively low rate of death among the main characters. It's not like Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead, where someone's dying every week, and if you're an actor, you've got to keep your resume up to date. It's not like that. What this means is for most of your characters, most of them, you get to see their journey from book 1 to book 14. It's a huge amount of time to spend watching their growth. And it's not simple growth where it's like, oh, they were young and naive and now they're not. Right? It's a bit more than that. Think of it like some characters grow wiser and more confident, others grow darker and more ruthless. And other characters, well, they refuse to change, no matter how much the world tries to influence them. Okay, so there is something for everyone. Not to mention, some of these character change moments, they happen very gradually and subtly, and others come in sharp emotional upheavals. Okay, so the arc factor is really phenomenal in the Wheel of Time. It's one of the best things about it. Bam! Alright, so look, the first book starts out a little bit stereotypically, okay? So there's a boy on a farm, he's got to go on a quest to stop the Dark Lord. Does that sound a little familiar? Yeah, well, they get better, really. Look, the first 3 novels in the series, they're what you call quest novels. They're going on a journey. They're going from one point to go and achieve a thing over there, right? So the first book is a quest for the Eye of the World, which is like a wellspring of magic. Book 2 is a quest for a magic horn. Book 3 is a quest for a magic sword. Okay, now I'm not trying to mock these stories, I'm just trying to explain that they're a little bit familiar, and it's really books 4 onwards where they really start to become something more unique. As far as quest novels go, they're some of the best out there, they really are, but they're just familiar fantasy tropes, things like the sweeping landscape shots, and lots of new people and new places, and long periods of walking, like a lot of walking. But it is also that sense of wonder, where over every hill there is a new adventure. And it's quite magical in that sense. But book 4, The Shadow Rising, is not about quests anymore. It's about whole nations and global superpowers suddenly being maneuvered and clashing against each other. It's about great battles and military campaigns, political manipulations, plots and schemes. This is where the Forsaken come in. Now, the Forsaken are the champions of the Shadow. They are super evil. Each of them were among the greatest and most powerful champions of a past age. Sealed away in the Dark One's prison and now free to walk the earth again. Think of them as demigods from an ancient age wielding forgotten magics. There are 13 of them, and each of them have their own secret plot. Now, this might sound like a weird thing for me to focus on. I mean, old fans of the series will be like, dude, what's with the Forsaken? Like, stop fanboying, get to the point. They have a much bigger impact on the series than you think. I mean, there are literally 13 bad guys with secret plots all spread out throughout the world. So think of it like a Sherlock series or a Sherlock book, Poirot, where you're hunting for the clues, you're putting it together, and then there's a dramatic reveal at the end. Except it's for 13 villains and for 13 secret plots all over the world, right? So that's half the reason why the series is so big, but there's also a mysterious bad guy pulling threads with lots of mysteries and big climactic reveals all throughout the series. Not to mention, a lot of the times the Forsaken is defeated, but then they escape and then they come back with new plans, right? So it's a constantly evolving landscape. And it's what really drives the plot forward, because you've got really active villains manipulating the world, right? So good. So in terms of plot lines, the Wheel of Time has some intriguing mysteries that really drive the plot forward, but there's also brilliant battle schemes and epic clashes of superpowers. There's a huge amount of time devoted to the one power and the developing of this magic system that's very unique. In many ways, it's become the standard of which all magic systems of the last 20 years have been measured against. So that's one of the reasons why Wheel of Time is so brilliant. The other elephant in the room... Guys, we gotta talk about the Slump. So what's the Slump? You've probably heard someone say about the Wheel of Time, I gave up because the series got boring and got too long. Okay, what they're probably referring to is the Slump period. It's considered books 8, 9, and 10. Okay? They're not bad books, they're just problematic, and they're definitely not as good as the rest of the series. Keep in mind, it's a period in the series where there are just simply too many characters and too many plot lines. Kind of like butter scraped over too much bread. Yeah. This meant that some characters would only get 2 or 3 chapters from their perspective per book, and it's just not enough time for their plot lines to develop. It feels like you have to wait 2 years for the next book, read 2 chapters from the plotline you actually care about, and then wait 2 years more again for the next book, right? It was a point where Robert Jordan actually had to slow down his writing. You see, he pumped out the books really quickly. It took him 5 years to do the first book because he had to get it right. But after he got the formula right, he pumped out books 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all 1 year apart. And it's really at book 8 when he had to slow down because the series had become popular. So he was now doing press tours, right, and interviews, and he had to do all that sort of marketing to go with it. He didn't have as much time for writing, so the book slowed down. So people were then waiting 2 years for the books instead of 1 year. And it's just a time where the fandom kind of soured on him a little bit, and it's left that lingering taste. I think the books are problematic, and they are slower, but there's a lot of pivotal moments in the series that happen in those books as well. So it's kind of, I think it's an unfair ratio. People are like, oh, the Wheel of Time is long and boring. No, 3 books out of 14 are long and boring. Okay, that's a pretty good ratio. That said, book 10 just sucks. Book 10 is the worst. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. All right, book 10 is rough. Honestly, if you're struggling to get through the series, fans are going to get mad at me, but maybe just read a summary of book 10 rather than the whole thing. If you're struggling, I don't know. I'm going to get pushed back on that. Let's move on. The third elephant in the room. How are there 3 elephants in this room? Simple, because the world of the Wheel of Time is just that big. The world is freaking huge. It's one of the series' greatest strengths, but it can often be a massive weakness as well. There are 14 nations on the main continent, and each has its own different government, different culture, and different royal houses, different ways of treating the channelers, and those cultures are so well fleshed out and real. But it also means sometimes Jordan stops the plot to describe the number of buttons on random citizens' clothing. I'm not even joking, that's literally an example. Now, this starts being amazing when the countries start going to war against each other or forming alliances. I mean, there are moments when you can say, oh, the aliens are here, and we know who the aliens are and what a big deal it is that they've shown up, right? It's this wonderfully realistic political landscape, kind of like the United Nations. And you're like, oh, okay, so France gets along well with England, but it doesn't like the Spaniards, that sort of hypothetical situation, right? Now, it's incredible when you look at it from the perspective of an encyclopedia level of information. I mean, look at this. The Wheel of Time Companion. It's a massive, chunky boy. I cannot tell you how many hours I've spent reading that book and reading all the Wikipedia pages, just getting so much information. So if you're into that, hey, welcome to the Wheel of Time. You're going to have a great time. You're going to love this. There is so much to learn about it. But it can be difficult for new readers to get through what feels like just a huge amount of world-building information. So see how you go with it. Also, if you're going to start the series for the first time, try to avoid, don't get the compendium because that's got spoilers everywhere, right? It openly says it on the back of the cover. So it can be tricky to avoid spoilers when you're like, oh, wait, who are the Tyrians again? Is that where Morghese is the ruler? No, that's not Morghese. That's the 9 High Lords. It can be a bit confusing, right? Just to say the least. Now let's talk about representation. I love talking about representation. So in all of my videos, I talk about how the series will actually represent different natures of race, gender, sexuality, and identity, all those kinds of things. Now, how does Wheel of Time measure up? Pretty good in some areas, pretty weak in others. First of all, Wheel of Time is famous for having lots of female characters, and Robert Jordan wanted to write a world where women and men were considered equal. Now, a lot of the readers thought, oh, well, this must be matriarchal, right? Because equal felt like women were significantly higher than they are in real life, because let's leave that alone. Wheel of Time was one of the first fantasy series I ever read, and I just assumed series where there were 50-50 male and female characters. I thought that was normal. It wasn't until I started reading Raymond Feist and Terry Brooks where I realized that was not the case at all. So often, the female characters, the women are only there to motivate the men, right? They're just there to be the love interest or the femme fatale, villain sort of thing. They're not actually there to be real people. Not so in the Wheel of Time, okay? Characters like Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine have significant portions of the series devoted to them, okay? So they actually get to be real people. And I think it's one of the things that the series does really well. Now, in regarding to how it represents race, it's a little bit messier. It's not as neat and tidy. You see, Wheel of Time talks about nationalism and your country of origin constantly, but they're not the countries and the races that we know on Earth. Okay, so someone's not described as having an Asian appearance. They're described as being from the borderlands, right? So people are constantly talked about their country of origin and the way that they speak and the way that they present themselves. Often the word foreigner is used as a dirty word, right? Because you get racist characters in the series, but they're not the races that we're familiar with. So it's one of the reasons why I think that the TV series did a great job in diversifying the main cast. It's totally appropriate because it's not about our races, it's about their race. For example, Rand's actor is from Czechia, and Egwene's actress is an Indigenous Australian. I'm Australian. Not Indigenous, but Australian, yeah. And how do they all come from the same village? Well, it's because they're not Earth's races. That said, though, when it comes to LGBT rep, there is very little at all. Okay, it's almost subtly there. I mean, like, there are 2 gay characters in the back books who are almost blink and you'll miss it sort of notices. I mean, I didn't even pick it up on it the first time I read it. There is, like, one gender-swapped character, but there's kind of like a magic thing happening that kind of makes it not count. I don't know. I do think the TV series, again, is doing more in that area, and I think it's totally appropriate. It's not a big deal in the book series, unfortunately, so take that for what it is. Is The Wheel of Time difficult to read? Kind of. So readability is about how long the sentences are, how big the words are, and how much work you've got to do to actually consume the content. Remember, if it's got a really high readability, it means it might have beautiful prose and, just gorgeous read out loud sentences, but it does also mean you've got to focus a bit harder when you're reading. And a low readability, well, sometimes it can feel childish, like a primary school kid wrote it, okay? So, for example, most adults read at a grade 9 level. So that's grade 9 as in school grades. Okay, and most novels, they're a little bit lower at grade 7. That's the average. Well, Wheel of Time's readability is grade 9. Okay, so it's a little bit higher. You can check it on the Hemingway app if you're interested to measure that readability. Now, a high score isn't bad, it just means you've got to spend a bit more mental energy to consume the content. So Wheel of Time might be a tricky thing for you if you're in a busy period of your life, or if you're still building up those reading muscles. So keep that in mind. Parent's guide and content warning for the younger readers, or maybe the more squeamish readers. Is this a violent series? Not too much. Like, the TV series is rated MA. Well, that's, what was it, TV 14 in America? So that means there's blood and guts, some sexy scenes, and a couple of adult themes, but that's because of the TV market. Post Game of Thrones, it's got to be like that. The book series is a little bit lighter. I'd call it PG or PG-13, depending on where you're from, okay? So it does have a bit of violence. There are sex scenes, but the sex scenes always fade to black, so it kind of alludes to it. You don't actually see stuff. Robert Jordan's also very careful at writing some of the more graphic aspects in a way that alludes to it and doesn't explicitly say it. So again, when I first read it as a teenager, I was like, oh, the series isn't that violent. Read it through the second time, I was like, oh, that's a little bit darker than I realized. So it's that dual perspective that actually really helps, and I think it's clever because kids can sort of self-censor a little bit. So keep it in mind, it's not too violent, but it does have a few moments of darkness. So I hope that gives you a clearer idea. How does the TV show compare to the books? So the fandom's pretty divided on this one, and I'll split it down. There's a lot to like about it. For one, the characters. Most of the characters feel like they've really just leapt off the page and onto the screen. And the actors and the main cast do a really good job. Moiraine and Lan in particular, perfect, right? The world building is also gorgeous. I mean, that's one of the best things about any adaptation. Just when you get all the creative graphic designers, set designers, and costume, all the people who just make it beautiful, and it's just visual art. And I love that the Wheel of Time, every shot was gorgeous. The real issue is the plot lines, because they've taken some pretty big liberties with changing the plot lines around. They've kind of combined elements of books 1 and 2 into series 1, which is meant to adapt book 1. And that's probably going to be the case all along. So there are a couple of times when, the more diehard fans like me are just like so furious that they've changed the plot so much. But honestly, a lot of new fans have see no problem with it. Okay, so honestly, the plot lines are different enough that you could enjoy the TV series and the books and be constantly surprised by the story. Like, I've read the first book 3 times now, and when I watched the TV series, I was constantly like, oh, that was surprising, you know? So there's reasons to watch both. It's not like Harry Potter, where they essentially tell the same story, right? So give them both a try. That would be my recommendation. The ending. This is a big question. When you want to consider, do I want to read a long series, you want to know if the ending's worth it. But there's nothing worse than a letdown of an ending.
Game of Thrones Season 8!
I personally think the ending of The Wheel of Time is one of the best endings in existence. I think it's perfect. I love it. Now, this is a good place to talk about it. Robert Jordan, the author, actually passed away before he could finish the series. He got given a terminal diagnosis, something to do with his heart, actually. He had 6 months to live, and in that time he made a whole bunch of notes and recordings of himself and left notes for another author to come and finish. That's when Brandon Sanderson came in as well, and he did the last 3 books. And I think he did a fantastic job. He told Robert Jordan's story, and he did tell it with his own words, so he wasn't trying to mimic Robert Jordan's prose and the style. So it's a little bit different, but they are a fantastic ending. There's a couple things like Brendan struggled with the character of Matt, and he was really good with the character of Perrin, so overall, he wrapped up all those series plot lines really well. There are a couple of them that were like a little bit rough, and there's one in particular which some people are like, that was kind of anticlimactic, did you forget about that character? But overall, it's a strong ending. All the main plot lines are done justice. I would say this is one of the best reasons to read The Wheel of Time, and it's one of the reasons to push through the slump because the ending is worth it. So how do I rate the series? Well, look, simple. I'd say the best books in the series are books 1, 4, 6, 12, and 14. You got that, right? The bottom tier are the slump, 8, 9, 10. Some people don't like book 3, The Dragon Reborn. I love it. I actually just finished reading it last night. That's a happy coincidence. It's a good book. It's structurally weird, but book 3 is good. But the best ones, in my opinion, is probably book 12. It's my personal favorite, The Gathering Storm, and I say it's my personal favorite because I was reading the series as it was coming out, as a younger reader. And when Jordan died, I was devastated. Like, I thought, that's it, the series is over. You know, I was never going to grow up and meet my hero. That sort of thing. But when book 12 came out, hope was restored, and we were all so excited to actually realize that the series was continuing, and it was continuing well. Not to mention, book 12 has some of the best scenes. It focuses a lot on Rand and Egwene, and their plot lines have some of the big, satisfying climactic moments of the series, and they're so dark. Oh, excellent. So it blew me away, and it still remains my favorite in the series to this day. So, start reading today. If you're looking to give Wheel of Time a try, the first book is called The Eye of the World. And I'll let you know up front, it is one of the stronger books in the series. So if you read book 1 and you're like, this series wasn't really for me, I didn't really like it that much. Well, honestly, you've had a fair sampling of it, okay? Book 1 is a good taste. If you don't like it, maybe try something else that's more your style. That's okay. But honestly, if you read book 1, you get a lot. You get a lot. Flex those reading muscles. Give the series your best shot. Well, that's it. That's The Wheel of Time. Now, I hope I've enticed you to read that. If not, that's okay. I've got a couple other videos up on my channel, and I've got a lot more to come. I want to introduce so many book series to you and help you find something. Remember, reading is something you're meant to enjoy. It's not meant to be a chore. You're not trying to pass an assignment at school, and you're not trying to impress anyone, okay? You don't have to impress me. I already think you're amazing. You watch this whole video. It's a long video, and I'm not that entertaining. Anyway, my editing skills suck. But you're already impressive, okay? Don't try to shock anyone by what you can read. Just read for your own enjoyment and for no other reason. And that's all the benefit you need. If you're curious about other book series, comment in the video below and let me know what you want me to introduce. Because I love reading. I've read, honestly, most of the major fantasy book series that are out there. At least in the English-speaking world, right? So comment below. Tell me what you want me to do next. Otherwise, do the YouTube stuff and like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Go find a book. Have a great time. Bye. Also, everyone, this is Nynaeve. Hello, Nynaeve. You are the cutest ever, aren't you? You're the cutest ever, aren't you? I'm such a big fan, I named my cat Nynaeve. Also, I named her correctly because Nynaeve sometimes likes to scratch me. Don't you? You're a little monster, aren't you? Hey, Nynaeve, where you going?